Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. A lot of you have been asking, how do I become a mobile developer? As many of you know, I focus on web development, so I have not too much knowledge in this area. So I decided to invite a mobile developer on to, share his experience of becoming a developer. We're going to dive into a few things. I know a few of you have asked me questions in the past, and so I think I do have them jotted down somewhere, but we're going to start and jump into his experience. So, Dave, glad you could be with us. Welcome.
Awesome, Don. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to this. So excited to dive into the world of mobile development. I can get started just kind of sharing my own experience.
Real quick before you do, how long have you been a mobile developer?
So professionally, I think I just passed the 1.5 year mark, and then started just dabbling on my own about a year prior to that. So about 2.5 years.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, let's dive into this. I'm ready.
Great. Well, awesome. Yeah. Again, been in the field about 1.5 years, but had a pretty tough and difficult journey to become an iOS developer. And so it's something that I'm really passionate about just because of, I've kind of come out on the other side and, failed a lot, but also learned a lot. And so I love kind of having these conversations and helping people learn more about, what it might take and maybe what some of the, strategies they can employ to kind of just boost their overall likelihood of becoming successful. So like I had said, I started about 2.5 years ago. And what prompted me to start looking into software development in general was I kind of just felt like I was plateauing in the field that I was in and not really being challenged in it very much anymore. And so I was doing like the business development side, working at a startup and, learned a lot and enjoyed aspects of it. But like I said, after about 1.5 years of doing that, was kind of just curious about what other things might be better suited to my skills, what other things might have a more clear, career trajectory in terms of income, job stability, these types of things. And so the first area that I started looking into is software development. And I have no background in it. I've, taken no courses or college credits towards it. And so like so many people, went on Google and just typed in how to learn software development. I didn't know, what languages to start with or anything like that. And for one reason or another, really from a very early on in the process, started with iOS development. I think I was biased because I've used Apple products and enjoyed using them for so long. And from what I heard, the Swift programming language, which is used for iOS development these days, I had heard just from what I was reading online that it was pretty beginner friendly. So that was me. I just kind of started down that path. I think I looked into some initial resources for maybe JavaScript, but for whatever reason, the barrier of entry seemed lowest to me for iOS. And so just kind of started walking in that direction, one step at a time, and never really looked back from that point. And so again, this was, I was still working my full-time job at the startup, and this was just early stages. And my thinking was, I just want to kind of go one area at a time and either see if I like it or just rule it out if it's not a good fit. And so again, started with software development and iOS, and really from an early on point, wanted to kind of like invest as much as I could into it. So basically that meant my nights and weekends, I was pretty focused on learning the skill, again, to get to the point of either, hey, no, I don't want to go this route anymore, or hey, what would it actually look like to turn this into a career and a profession, apart from what I'm doing now? Because determining either one of those things was a win for me. So I was able to kind of dedicate, again, like most of my free time for probably about 4 or 5 months pretty seriously, learning with the free resources that, so many of us start with iOS development. So a lot of stuff from like Paul Hudson, Ray Wenderlich is another resource that I learned from. And essentially, while I was doing that too, I was reaching out to other developers in the field, trying to find other iOS developers through, my college network and things like that to hear what their journey was like, to hear maybe what they would recommend for somebody in my circumstance. And so I was lucky enough to have, several people that were willing to have conversations with me and kind of steer me in the right direction from an early on in my process. So really grateful for that, but essentially got to the point where, I was far enough along I had confirmed that I enjoyed the process of building apps, the kind of the thought process of what it takes to be a software developer. I felt like my skill set was, basically made me able to kind of pick it up easy and, more so than some other fields and stuff like that. And so got to the point where I was like, I basically had to make a decision after a period of time of like, okay, I've kind of taken it as far as I can, giving only about 10 hours a week because that was all I had to give it, versus, I realized that it was so vast that I wasn't going to get there only giving it 10 hours a week to be able to land an entry-level job. I felt like it was just too vast of a field to be able to learn what you need to learn to be qualified to, start applying for entry-level jobs and have an impressive portfolio. And so basically the question in my head then became, okay, what are the steps that I could what are the routes that I could go to turn this into a career? And for me, it was basically, do like a full-time boot camp to, accelerate my learning, or basically quit my job and kind of go full self-taught with kind of being able to dedicate full-time hours to it. And so I was in a position where, I was fortunate enough to be able to afford kind of the upfront cost of a boot camp. Also fortunate in that, my wife was working a pretty good full-time job at the time and essentially was able to kind of float us indefinitely. And so basically for my own personal situation, it wasn't going to be putting myself in a potentially dangerous situation by like leaving my job and leaving the income that I had to go pursue this thing, which again, I realize is a very fortunate position to be in. But because of that, I opted for the boot camp route. And so, I know you've had people on your show talking about Dev Mountain. So that was basically the only in-person full-time iOS boot camp at the time. And so this was like late 2019 that I was kind of going through this process. So in one sense, I know a big question that, you dive into a lot is, hey, which boot camp should I take? For my situation, it was pretty obvious because there was only one option at the time. So again, made that process easy. And so, basically went through the enrollment process, got accepted to the program, did a bunch of the pre-course work leading up to it, and kind of put in my 2 weeks notice. And so that was kind of my, I guess, kind of stepping off the diving board of kind of making that decision to where, okay, I'm in it now. I can't look back. I just have to look forward until I kind of reach my destination of, becoming employed as an entry-level iOS developer. So that's the route that I went. Learned a ton from the boot camp. As you can imagine, when you have 10 hours a day to dedicate to anything, you can learn a lot in 3 months time. But the one thing I'll say on that is, all you leave with, in my experience of graduating the boot camp, is a solid foundation that you then need to continue to build on. And you learn, I guess, the ability to keep learning on your own. And so I kind of, was told that, fortunately, by many people ahead of time that, hey, don't expect just because you sign up for this boot camp that you're going to be guaranteed a job. I still say that today to everyone that I have conversations with. And, think it's maybe even more true now. So again, left that program with a solid foundation and enjoyed the curriculum and the environment. It was really valuable for me. And then after that, it took me 6 months of basically every day waking up, asking myself, what can I do today to get closer to landing my first full-time job? So big things there were building out a portfolio of App Store apps, particularly for iOS development. That's a really critical piece that you need to have, because again, as somebody in my position at the time, I had no prior job experience or anything. And so having, something to show on the App Store that you have built yourself was really a critical piece to, getting any sort of consideration for a first round interview or things like that. The other things that I hit on were building out my GitHub page with a bunch of, more additional sample projects that maybe weren't on the App Store. Trying to optimize my LinkedIn profile and my presence on LinkedIn. And then kind of what really pushed me over the line to where I started getting much more responses on my applications was doing an internship. And so that again, kind of the big barrier that I'm sure you hear from a lot of your, guests are the biggest thing going against you is your lack of experience when going for entry-level jobs. And that's a really big barrier to overcome. But kind of my mindset was, okay, I can't change the fact that I've never had a job as a software developer, but what is within my control is basically every other aspect of the process. Again, with things like LinkedIn, building out a portfolio, basically all the other pieces of what an employer might be looking at when they receive your application, those are within your control. And so those were the things that I, tried to hit on a lot. So, for me to kind of wrap this up, I sent about 90 applications online a month for about 6 months. So if you do the math, I think I just crossed over 500 total, which sounds like an incredible amount. And it is, but just keep in mind, the majority of those applications are kind of the 1 or 2 click applications on Indeed. It's not like I was doing cover letters or, anything tailored like that. So my kind of approach was definitely hit hard on numbers. I don't think that you have much to lose to cold apply to a place, just a little bit of your time if you kind of can optimize for speed and, kind of learn the ins and outs of the job search websites, but then also focus on, warmer leads at the same time and definitely prioritizing those. So any connections and things like that, I was hitting pretty hard in that area too. So my first role, again, to kind of wrap this up, I got hired on at CVS Health just as an iOS developer on their team. And that was kind of, what again brought me over the finish line, kind of the end of my initial journey that I set out on. And, from there, it's insane how the difference of how legit other employers will consider you if you have other job experience. And, kind of the thing that went against me so hard to get my first role is now working for me now that I have experience on my resume and things like that. So it was definitely a long road. It took a lot of persistence. And I think, the people that are succeeding in getting entry-level developer roles today, especially people without maybe formal backgrounds, they all have persistence. They all, can endure the rejection that is inevitable. And so that's a big thing that I try and encourage people is sticking with it. But also, if you are strategic over a long enough period of time, it's very doable. So that's kind of my story, and would love to expand on any aspect of that and kind of go from there.
I love it. I appreciate you sharing so much detail. Definitely have a few questions. Yeah. You had mentioned well, first of all, congrats on the position. Because, well, so I guess we'll dive into this. I've had a few people share with me that they really have a strong belief that it's easier to get into web development than it is mobile development. They feel like mobile development is if you are, I guess they feel like you need to use something else as a stepping stone to get into it. Usually like mobile positions will only hire experienced developers, where web development, that's not the case, which I don't necessarily agree with that, but they feel like mobile development is not for entry-level developers. You even mentioned, that's the funny thing, is you mentioned you had perceived the barrier to entry for JavaScript to actually be harder than mobile development. And so I feel like I'm getting like mixed signals on if mobile development is entry-level friendly.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question you bring up. And yeah, just for context, when I had made the comment on, barrier to entry, that was really just in the context of me starting out and like being able to do just the very basics. So, that didn't even have anything related to the job market or entry-level roles when I was making that comment. But yeah, to elaborate on that, I think I can totally see why why there's maybe a sentiment around that and why that's, you've heard rumblings and things like that. And I think, again, it just goes back to how difficult it is to land an entry-level mobile role without any prior experience as a software developer or things like that. And so, I mean, if we just look at the numbers, there's much fewer mobile roles available. So that's like one factor. I will say that there's probably more web developers kind of in the market. So that's also another, thing that you have to be mindful of. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard that from other people that, mobile initially might be harder to break into. I've never gone the other route, so I can't speak from personal experience. But even if it's harder to an extent, I don't think that means that anybody should, count it out as an option for them to pursue off the bat. And I would even say, if you're pretty confident that you eventually want to get to iOS development or mobile, Android is kind of in a similar boat to iOS. My recommendation is just to start there and, see if you can make it happen. Again, with, learning over time on your own, building out the portfolio, building, refining the other aspects of your resume and things like that. I think it is doable. I think, again, I can only really speak to my own experience and to what I've heard personally from other people that I've, had conversations with. But yeah, it's a long process. If that's the route that you're going to go, again, might have its own challenges in addition to web development, but I wouldn't let that kind of discourage somebody who's, again, pretty confident that they want to end up in that area. I think it is possible. There's a lot of obstacles that you have to overcome, but again, that's partly why I'm so passionate about kind of having conversations like this and helping out people who aren't as far along in their journey, because it is really intimidating and overwhelming, and there is a lot of rejection. But like I said, I see a lot of really persistent people who are also trying to approach things strategically that are finding success in landing entry-level iOS roles. So there's plenty of proof out there that it is possible. And I think, if it's something that you're interested in, kind of like looking to those people and saying, okay, what were some of the things that they have done that I can learn from and kind of apply to my own situation?
Yeah, I like that you reached out to mobile developers in the beginning just to hear their journeys. I think that's effective. I mean, even for web development or any kind of software engineering. It also sounds like you were interested in building mobile apps. And so sometimes I think people don't quite know what they want to build. They know they want to code, right? But, and I think they're still kind of exploring and they're still trying to watch YouTube videos and figure out what would I even enjoy.
Right.
But it feels like, because after I did the Dev Mountain iOS program, I had some people reach out to me, and it sounds like, a few of them were definitely struggling to find a job, and it's been a while. Yeah. But also it kind of felt like their portfolios might've been lacking as well. And so it's good to hear, as long as you're interested in it. I mean, you really pushed forward with it after the program. So it sounds doable, but you also got the internship. And I think that was a really smart decision. Internships are kind of rare outside of you being in college. Usually internships are a little bit more open to traditional education. So how do you even find the internship?
Yeah, I was going to say that exact same thing in regards to internships, specifically for mobile roles. It is basically, if you're not a college student, like you said, there are very, very few options out there. Basically, the two camps that I found was like the Lyft program for internships that you could apply to, or like Microsoft had a mobile one, Shopify, I think. And they were open to non-students. The thing is, they had thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people applying to them. So don't get me wrong, I threw my name into the mix for all those because, for the experience and kind of the legitimacy of some of those bigger companies would have been a really, really helpful thing for anyone. But as you can imagine, I didn't make it through to the final round on any of those. And so kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum was really early stage companies. So AngelList happened to be the place that I could find what they kind of label as iOS internships. Keep in mind, again, very early stage companies. And I think a big reason why there's so many on there is maybe these companies don't have funding. They're really just looking for extra hands. And so the thing is that almost all of them are going to be unpaid. And, there's a whole kind of debate that people enjoy having over unpaid internships. So all I'll say there is that basically I was, again, in a fortunate enough position to where I could dedicate 20 hours of unpaid kind of work towards this internship as a very strategic, temporary tool to launch me into getting a full-time paid market rate job. And so that was my mindset, and my approach with it is, this is not the end goal. I owe these people nothing because they're not paying me anything, but it was really impactful. Even just from day one, having that on my resume, the increase in the response rate. Now, from day one, was I, this much better, more proficient developer? No, but the perception from these employers or my perception was elevated. So it very much served the purpose in my experience. And I've heard very similar things from a lot of people who have, done internships, whether they're paid or not. And so, the other thing that I'll say there is, if it's not a paid internship, just do it part-time, I would recommend. And most places are going to have no pushback on that, again, because, they're not paying you. And so, again, it really served a purpose for me. And like I said, I've heard a lot of, similar things from other people who have tried that. And I think, again, the biggest obstacle is lack of experience in an employer's mind. And so an internship kind of is the closest thing that you can get to that. Because it does say, I've worked on a team with other people. It's a real company. It has a website, it has a product, and I've been involved. And that's, I think, a really, really powerful thing for people who are applying to entry-level roles that, again, don't have prior development experience. So it was a great benefit to me.
I like that. Definitely a controversial conversation. I'm in the boat of, you made a good move and not enough people do what you just did. But like you said, if it's free, you don't owe them anything. And it should be part-time, right? Doing a free full-time internship. I mean, I don't know, if you're living with your parents, like you're just in a situation where you can afford that, sure, but man, people have bills. So like there are part-time internships on AngelList. I highly recommend people check that site out. And you're essentially just doing some work and using them to boost you into that second position. And a lot of people are even scared to like it was an internship, but there's a lot of value. I mean, if an employer sees internship on your LinkedIn, because I was just checking yours out, your LinkedIn, your resume, etc. In my opinion, for like 99% of resumes, it's way more value than a personal project.
I think
it was a good move. So that's good advice for people that kind of want to figure out how to get that experience without actually having it. Okay, so I feel like my big concern was how accessible is it? And it feels like you said, there aren't as many positions, but there aren't as many people applying for those positions either. But it really sounds like you dove pretty deep into Swift, into iOS development. Right. I've heard, so my assumption is this is incorrect, but I've heard people recommend just learn something like React Native and build something hybrid, and you're going to be plenty qualified to be able to get into entry-level mobile positions. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely another route that you can take, and I think if that's, again, going back to, if that's what you're passionate about, that's what you really, I guess the lane of software development that you want to be in. Yeah, there's jobs out there for it. And I'm sure there are people finding success, breaking into those entry-level roles. For me, again, just from early on in the process, really fell in love with kind of the whole environment around building iOS applications. I really, loved seeing what other people were building for the iPhone and using Swift, kind of, what they call, the native way to build applications for the iPhone versus like a cross-platform way. I guess I had heard early on too that there's, certain advantages that you can leverage by building things natively that the cross-platform like languages and ways aren't able to leverage certain things and maybe get that extra 10% of performance and things like that. So I guess, I don't know if it's, was biased towards, I guess, the purest way of doing it or whatever, but that's what I really enjoyed. And for me, I think I benefited a lot from kind of picking one thing and going really deep in that versus trying to learn 2 or 3 or 4 things and not learning any of them well. Because there's each direction you go, there's a vast amount of things to learn. And so my approach was to kind of, pick one, specialize in that, become really good in that. And then, if a couple of years down the road, I want to veer into another lane, that can easily be done. I think the challenges are going to be similar. Like the things that you'll have to overcome are going to be similar, and the strategies are going to be really similar in, like we've talked about, building out a portfolio, releasing apps into the various app stores, whether it's, Google Play for Android or the App Store for iOS, doing an internship, having a polished resume, having a polished LinkedIn page. I think a lot of the strategies are going to be really similar. And I just don't know. I haven't heard that one or the other is going to be, that much easier or that much harder. So I would encourage people to, if there is that interest there, by all means, try it out, start learning from some of the free resources online or some of the, inexpensive ones, and get your feet wet. That's kind of where everyone has to start. And, before you make a big decision to leave a job or do this or that, anyone can find, 5 hours or 8 hours a week to carve out and really just start exploring if it's something that they like doing, and they want to keep going further. So yeah, that's my recommendation. I guess I put them in pretty similar camps. I would put all aspects of mobile in like pretty similar camps in terms of difficulty, number of jobs available, and that kind of thing. So, in that sense, if that is the case, then I guess personal preference can be that deciding factor for a lot of people.
Okay. I really should go through the job postings and just see what a lot of these mobile positions are requiring, if native is preferred. But it sounds like it's going to be equally challenging potentially. So
yeah,
you went to a coding boot camp. There's kind of this notion of like a lot of people when they graduate, they don't regret the coding boot camp, but they're like, okay, now that I know what I was supposed to learn, I probably could have done it on my own. Did you have that notion afterwards?
Yeah. What's interesting is, no boot camp has some like magic formula or has some information that only they have access to. That's not how it works. So yeah, I'm a believer that, information wise, all the information that I learned from this boot camp over 3 months, I could learn either for free or for a very low cost, online in various formats, courses, articles, things like that. So it's not, in my opinion, it's not the information that I paid for, at least. It's the environment, and the ability to learn and consume the information, in a boot camp environment for myself. It really accelerated how quickly I could build that foundation and become competent in the things that I needed to become competent in. So yeah, I think if I went full self-taught and just went that route, I could get to that same point. I just think it would have taken me a lot longer. Because keep in mind, these programs, there's a lot of structure to them. There's a lot of purpose behind that structure. You have access to instructors who know what they're talking about, who can help, your unique situation, which is very different than trying to scour Stack Overflow. And, to get that kind of hands-on guidance and things like that was really valuable for me. I think I have decent discipline, but I don't think I would have been disciplined enough to get to that same point after 3 months if I was completely on my own. Whereas maybe there's a small percentage of people who could pull that off. But for me, I guess a big thing that I got was the overall environment that allowed me to get that foundation much quicker than if I hadn't basically had the opportunity to go to a boot camp.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you happen to know what resource you would have looked up or what course you would have taken if you didn't go to the coding boot camp?
Yeah. I probably would have continued on with one of the kind of top websites in the space, started by a guy named Ray Wenderlich. So he has a big team now, but essentially they put out all different sorts of mobile focused tutorials and courses and certain like learning paths. So I had gone through a bunch of the like beginner and basic ones before going to the boot camp, but they really do take it to a pretty advanced level. And the format was pretty consumable for me. But there's so many good courses out there these days that are teaching very similar things. You want to make sure you're looking at ones that are up to date and not 5 years old, because a lot has changed since then. But a lot of the information that they're teaching is taught in a very similar way. So I think, a lot of like the popular courses out there, if you can actually stick with it and get to the end, you're going to come out with a lot, and gain a lot from a lot of those. But yeah, that's the one that I was doing just from early on. And so I probably would have continued with that. But then as you get further, and you start to maybe build out your own projects and kind of, branch into creating your own things without the help of a tutorial, that's when you have to start looking at different resources, pulling together different articles and, forums to find the solution to like your unique situation at that one point. And that's when you can, start to learn a lot more, kind of like taking the training wheels off type of thing. And you become pretty proficient at identifying what some of the good resources are that consistently have good information, and kind of stick with the small handful of those that you'll find on Google. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Sean Allen has some great courses from beginner to more advanced, and Swift UI is kind of a newer thing on the scene now that there's a lot of courses on. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and I think again, following the structure of those courses and actually getting through to the end is really valuable versus the person that does the first 10% of a course and then gets a new one and then gets a new one and never actually sees it to completion. Because like I said, a lot of these courses, there's intention behind what the topics are and how the progression goes. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Okay, I appreciate the recommendations. I do. It's hard to figure out. I mean, that's the argument. There's always that information out there. There's enough information out there to learn what you need to learn, but very few, even with web development, very few people can become a developer being self-taught. It's just, there are so many other habits that you really have to tackle to be able to essentially cross that finish line. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's really tough. So there are people that pull it off, and I'm so impressed by those people. Yeah. But for me, having like from the start, having kind of the initial guidance for that 3-month period was really helpful. And then kind of the idea is that by the end, you're able to carry that on yourself, and you kind of learn how to keep learning the skills. Because that's the thing is, it's impossible to learn everything, and there's no need to learn everything about iOS development, but being able to learn a new framework that you've never worked with before is kind of its own skill. And that's what makes you a good developer, is saying, okay, I've never worked with this, technology or this tool or this new framework from Apple. But I've worked with enough of their frameworks that, and enough their APIs or whatever it is, that I'll be able to pick it up given enough time. And so that is, I think another, big thing that hopefully people are taking away from the boot camp and still applying on their own after they leave.
I like it. I feel like, so you did a really good job at going into a lot of detail of like almost every single part of your journey. You said you even wrote a few articles, right?
So I've actually never done articles.
Video?
I really don't enjoy writing, but I have some videos.
Okay.
And stuff like that. So.
Okay. It shows. It definitely shows. I feel like you gave us a really good in-depth and just information and path going forward with just not even just iOS development in general, but I think you gave a lot of good general tips for any potential mobile developer. But I want to hear what it's like being a mobile developer. What was are you still at your first job right now?
I'm at my second job now. Yeah. At a startup.
Okay. What was so the first job wasn't the internship that you're talking about?
My first job was at CVS Health. And so it was, a really big organization. It's basically, it's a non-tech company trying to figure out how to leverage tech. And so for my first, job, basically I was at the point where anybody that was going to offer me a job and pay me anything, I was going to accept and, put in my time to maybe get into a more ideal situation later on. was kind of my approach, because I wasn't getting, a bunch of offers that I could compete with or whatever. So yeah, I ended up being there about 8 months. And it was a really good kind of first, exposure to working on a massive code base. I think that's one of the biggest, things that you don't expect, going from only really working on, your own personal projects, which should be very small, but the scope of a personal project, it's, one developer for however many weeks or months that you may work on it. It's a small scope, as it should be. It should, your portfolio shouldn't be these enterprise level scale projects. But when you start working at a company, that's what you're walking into. And so it's a completely different landscape, going from, maybe a project with 12 to 15 files to one with 20 times that. The other thing that you kind of come to realize is that, when you're working on your own project, you understand everything that's going on. You were the one who wrote it. But when you're walking into an existing code base, there could be dozens of people or several dozens of people that have written code for that code base. They all maybe have a little bit different style or, pros and cons to their method of building out features and things like that. And so a big part of it is, you're so used to, 90% of your time coding is actually building out a new feature. Whereas, a big portion of your time working at a company is like sifting through the code base, understanding what's going on, and, linking things together of, okay, it seems like this person built out this feature for X, Y, and Z reasons. Therefore, I should consider this when I'm, touching this part of the code. So it's a lot of connecting the dots. And, you're not like whipping through tons of new screens, in a given week or even in a given month, just because there's a lot more that goes into, how the code was constructed in the past. What are the current, architecture principles that we're following, making sure you're following kind of the protocol for your team's environment and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a lot of things that you learn, that really you would have no point in learning as a solo developer working on personal projects. So things like, version control and, continuous integration and continuous delivery, a lot of those things that I really didn't have much experience with, you kind of have to learn on the job. And so, the learning never ends. Anytime you walk into a new code base, there's a lot to get familiar with. Walk into a new team, every team has, differences in their processes or difference in the tools that they use and things like that. So I was at my first job for about 8 months. And at that time I was in, for my own life circumstances, was wanting permanent remote work. And so that's what I asked for and wasn't granted that. And so at that point, just started looking at other jobs that would allow that. And, we're lucky enough that there's a lot out there that are allowing remote work. And that's what led me to my current company, which is a startup originally based in San Francisco, and kind of went from, the massive non-tech kind of slow moving team to really small, quick paced moving team, to where I was now, at my first job, I was on one of about 6 teams, and had only had insight into a small portion of the app, to where now I was one of 2 iOS developers and basically had insight and influence on the entire application and like everything that the team was doing. And so that really increased kind of the amount that I was learning, the amount that I was being challenged, and kind of like the amount of enjoyment and fun I was having, being able to be a lot more involved and having a little bit more influence on, directional decisions and things like that. So yeah, it's been a really good switch for me. But like I said, you're always learning. No code base is perfect, and so it's good to kind of have the mindset of always be critical in evaluating what are areas of improvement, and then, kind of, I guess, make your voice be heard, and what your thoughts are on constantly iterating and improving kind of the code that you're working in on a daily basis. Because I don't know about you, but if you have pride in what you're doing, and if you have pride in the code base that you're working on, chances are you're going to be much more fulfilled in what you do, much more motivated to apply yourself and kind of continue to level up in your skills. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today.
I love it. I think that's why I worked at 3 startups as a developer. I didn't want to work at a larger company, just being siloed into just a more, you're more focused, right? And, someone explained to me, they love working at a larger company because what they create, so many people use. And maybe with something like CVS, a lot of people use that mobile app, but I love the idea. It almost sounds like you have more autonomy and, like you said, influence over the direction of the mobile app. That sounds more fulfilling to me, to be honest. So
yeah, it is for me too. Everybody is kind of looking for maybe different things, and some people maybe like to settle in a little bit more and not have to adjust and adapt as much. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I'm more on your side of things of a little bit quicker moving, and it can be more engaging if you find yourself in a good environment in a startup, and there's some situations you have to be mindful of and careful of in the startup world, but there's a lot of good ones out there too.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're happy where you're at, you doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I'm telling you, so many people are just staying in their old position. What if you never even moved to development in the first place? Like, do you ever think about that?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. And it keeps, it keeps me grateful, because, I know what it would be like. And I know that I wouldn't be, as fulfilled in the work, that I am today. So yeah, I mean, I feel incredibly fortunate to almost just been in a position where I could even consider other options, and kind of be able to forego kind of a job and an income that I had, and kind of put that off to pursue maybe something that was better suited for me. So yeah, that's, also why I really encourage people to just look through the logistics of, your own situation, and kind of make sure that you're taking on an appropriate level of risk. There's always going to be some element of risk, because nothing is a given, but trying to avoid situations where, if you don't get that job in the next 3 weeks, like you're going to be in a bad position financially or whatever. And that's where, it's up to the individual to kind of assess what factors apply to them, and everyone's situation is different. But yeah, I do think about it. And I guess, yeah, as I mentioned before, it kind of gets me excited to talk to people who are kind of considering a similar move. I have conversations like that pretty regularly, where people are like, hey, I know you left your job. Like I'm starting to look into software development. Like, could we have a chat? And yeah, I'm always open to those kinds of conversations, just because of kind of where it's brought me and kind of the life I get to live now. Is yeah, if I can ever help anybody out, I'm always happy to do so.
Cool. That's very generous of you. Speaking of which, we'll go ahead and let you share that. Before we do, I feel like, I don't know, usually I'll ask more questions, but you did a good job of going into detail with everything. You really did. I think this is going to be really helpful.
Awesome.
I guess anyone, if you're watching YouTube, in the comments, feel free to leave a comment, ask questions, even reach out to Dave. But yeah, let's go ahead and share some of your details. If people want to reach out to you, and anything else you want to shout out, where could they reach you?
Yeah, definitely. An easy place to reach me, if you have Twitter. I am on Twitter, so I think my handle is Dave Jacobson iOS. So we can maybe link that up. But yeah, I read all my messages there, and am usually pretty good about getting back to people. You could connect with me on LinkedIn. And then I also have a YouTube channel. If you just search Dave Jacobson, and have put out just, a variety of videos covering similar things that we've talked about today. So my intention with starting that was, what are the videos and kind of topics that would have benefited me when I was just starting out in my journey, or when I was in the job hunt process? What are some things that would have been really helpful in my situation? I'm not super active or as active I would like to be anymore in putting out videos, but I kind of have a library that if you are either considering iOS development, or if you're kind of already on that road and in the grind of trying to land your first job, there's definitely some things that you could check out there. Those are the only socials I'm on.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm looking at your YouTube channel. You have maybe 20 videos?
Yeah, something like that.
You're already at almost 2K subscribers. That's pretty good. You might consider continuing that if you do want to grow your channel.
Yeah. It's, we've talked about how I just went through a move and some other things. It's something I would like to get back into. But different times in life, there's different priorities and things that you have to put your time into. But yeah, I enjoy it and definitely intend to get back into the swing of things.
All right. Well, definitely check out his channel. His thumbnails are way better than mine. So looks like a pretty useful channel. But yeah, I think that's it. Dave, I really appreciate this. I haven't explored mobile development. I haven't done a video on this at all. So, I was planning on making this kind of just like an intro video, and I might expand on it, but you went into such great detail. I think this is going to be really helpful for people. So
yeah, glad to hear. Don, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Stick around for a couple minutes, but thanks so much for coming on.
All right.